was hard to pull myself away there. I'm going to see if I can move this without spilling. All right. So the story picks up in John chapter 7, right where we left off. So if you remember a few weeks ago, Jesus feeds 5,000 people with a very small quantity of food. It's a cool miracle. And that launches into some real tension, some real controversy, as Jesus is basically taking this opportunity to point out that, for one thing, there is rising opposition to Jesus. There are people who absolutely hate his guts and want him dead. And the reason is because they feel that he is a threat to them in some way. They are threatened by him. And along with that, there are people who are following him, who say they like him, but maybe they like him for the wrong reasons. They like him because they have something they're trying to accomplish. They have their own expectations, and they're trying to use Jesus to get what they want. And so Jesus kind of exposes some things. He sees right through all this, and we get this confrontational moment where he basically what he's saying is, look, this is what I'm about, and if you're not in, then just leave now. Quit pretending you're something that you're not. Quit pretending that you're after something that you're not. Let's all be honest about what our motives are here. Here's what I'm here for. If you're not on board, if you're not with it, then okay. Just take your stand. Pick which side of things you're going to be on, and quit pretending you're on this side when really you want me to come over to your side. Right? And so Jesus kind of says, this is who I am, this is what I'm here for, and you can take it or leave it, because and realize if you take it or leave it, you're taking or leaving God himself and what God is doing. Right? So it's this very tense moment, this big confrontation. A lot of people who had been following Jesus, who had considered themselves disciples of Jesus, are now no longer interested in him. They're ticked off, they leave, they want nothing to do with him. And we pick up where that leaves off in chapter 7. And now we're gonna see Jesus kind of responding in reaction to that, just very aware of what's going on, and some more people kind of missing the idea. And we're just going to look at a short passage this week, and over the next couple of weeks we're going to dig in some more into chapters 7 and 8 in a series of dialogues and back and forth that happens, and we're going to just see those tensions keep building. So let's pick up where we left off in John chapter 7. It says, after this, so again, after all that, after that confrontation and a bunch of people leave him, it says, after this, Jesus went around in Galilee. He did not want to go about in Judea because the Jewish leaders there were looking for a way to kill him. Right? So the southern part of Israel, where Jerusalem is, the capital city, he's kind of staying away from that area. He's staying away from the south area known as Judea. You got Galilee in the north, Samaria in the middle, Judea in the south, right? We just stay out of Samaria because that's where the Samaritans live. Jesus is from Galilee. That's the sticks. That's hill country. That's where the hill people live. It's not really hilly, but necessarily, but that's just how they're seen. They're hillbillies up there, right? That's how people in the south saw them. And then you have Judea in the south. You have the biggest city in the area, Jerusalem, right? And Jesus is staying out of Judea. He's staying out of the southern area because he knows that tensions are rising. He knows that people are out to kill him. And he knows that he's going to die. This is actually part of the plan. Spoiler alert, sorry. But this is where it's going, and Jesus knows this is where it's going, but he knows it's not time yet. That's going to become important, right? So he's staying in Galilee for now. But when the Jewish festival of Tabernacles was near, okay, so there were 3 festivals that God commanded the Israelites to celebrate every year, and this is a big deal. It's a celebration. It's a good time. It's a lot going on. The Festival of Tabernacles was this one. We're going to get more into that in the next couple of weeks, but it's kind of this cool, it was like a really big deal, really exciting time. It was an 8-day celebration, and everybody, so for these 3 festivals, people are supposed to congregate in Jerusalem if at all possible. So even if they live out in Galilee or way out like in another country, Jews from all over the world, or to a pretty broad reach, are coming 1 to 3 times a year to Jerusalem for things like the Tabernacles festival, right? And so anyway, so the Festival of Tabernacles is coming up. Jesus normally would be going to Jerusalem for this. We've seen that's his usual practice for the festivals, for the feasts. He goes to Jerusalem like you're ideally supposed to if you can. And it's also a great opportunity for him to preach, make himself known, right? Build his platform. Well, that's what his brothers think. So it's Jesus' brothers are going to talk to him. Now remember, so Jesus, son of a virgin birth, right? Conceived by the Holy Spirit. We're not going to get into the biology of it, not that we would understand it anyway. But Jesus had brothers and sisters, right? Half brothers and sisters through Joseph and Mary, their kids, right? After Jesus. So anyway, so Jesus' brothers said to him, "Leave Galilee and go to Judea so that your disciples there may see the works you do." Now, I want you to try to imagine a way that a younger brother could say something like that to an older brother and not be sarcastic. I can't think of one either. And we're going to find out they're being snarky. They're being sarcastic here, right? No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. For even his own brothers did not believe in him, right? So that's John just telling us, oh, by the way, in case you thought they were serious, they're not. They're making fun of him. They're giving him a hard time, right? You imagine your older brother is going around proclaiming he's the Son of God and he's the Messiah and he's the Savior of the world. You know, you already had enough reasons to make fun of your brother. I mean, Jesus probably doesn't give you a lot of reasons. It's kind of, he'd be a really frustrating older brother to have. You know, it's like I don't know if you've heard the Christian comedian Mark Lowry, but he has a bit about like, can you imagine being Jesus' little brother and like Mary being like, why can't you be more like your brother Jesus? Well, I don't know, Mom. Why can't you be more like Jesus? You know, we all should be more like Jesus, right? But they don't believe him. We actually, now that changes. Actually, we see in 1 Corinthians 15, either 15 or 16, I'm getting mixed up now, but one of those two, there's actually a mention that Jesus is actually, after he rises from the dead, one of the first people he appears to is his brother James, who would later go on to write the letter James that we have in the New Testament. Jesus also had a brother named Jude who wrote the letter called Jude that we have in the New Testament, right? Don't know if you knew that, but that's pretty cool. Those are both Jesus' like biological half-brothers that wrote those, right? But at this point in time, he's their brother. So of course they don't believe in him, right? Of course they don't believe the stuff he's saying. How could you possibly believe that about your brother? So they don't believe in him. And Jesus has something pretty like, man, pretty sharp to say to him. Therefore Jesus told them, "My time is not yet here. For you, any time will do. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I am not going up to this festival because my time has not yet fully come." After he said this, he stayed in Galilee. However, after his brothers had left for the festival, he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Right? So Jesus' response to them is basically, yeah, I mean, of course you guys don't get it. Right? Any time's good enough for you. Right? Their logic to Jesus, I mean, in addition to probably just like giving him a hard time and making fun of him, but they're also like, look, buddy, you're trying to start like a movement or whatever. You gotta build your platform here. You gotta build your brand. You know, that's not gonna happen. Like, this is prime time. This is like a Super Bowl commercial, right? Like that's when you go to Jerusalem during one of these big feasts and you go up there, like you have some opportunities to reach a lot of people with your message. Right? Like this is prime time right here where you can get your word out there. Like if this is what you're trying to do, you want people to think you're a big deal, this is your chance to do it. And Jesus' response is just like, yeah, you guys really don't get it at all. And you know what? Of course you don't. Because the world doesn't hate you. What he's saying is you belong to the world. Which, if you read John's gospel, you might notice that the world, translating this Greek word cosmos, it's not really ever a good thing. Right? Like John uses this language, Jesus uses this language of the world to talk about just basically the dark forces of the world that are generally opposed to God and opposed to the good things that God is doing. The dark motives behind the world that create everything evil in the world, right? It's never a good thing. It's never a compliment to be called part of the world. Now at the same time, Jesus also says, like for example in John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son," right? And the next line is he came into the world not to condemn the world, but to save the world through him, right? So God loves the world. God wants to save the world, but God does not play around about how serious things are. Jesus knows exactly how bad the world is, right? And so Jesus is like, well, yeah, you guys are part of the world. The world, you're buddies with the world, right? But the world hates me. You know why? Because I see right through it and I call it out. Right? Like I tell it like it is. Now, a lot of people say, I just tell it like it is, and what they really mean is, I'm too lazy to have a filter. I should be able to say whatever I want and not ever have repercussions that I don't like, right? What Jesus is actually doing is he's actually telling truth. He's actually exposing things. He's bringing light into a dark place. And people who like the darkness, it's because they have something to hide, and they don't like what they do in the dark being exposed in the light. And so they're not too thrilled about it. So Jesus is bringing light into this dark place. No wonder the world is not happy with him. No wonder the world doesn't like him, right? So that's basically what he's saying. But he says something really interesting here too. He says, normally, he would go up to the feast, but he says here, I'm not going up. Why? Because my time is not ready yet. It's not my time yet. It's not time for that yet. Now we're going to see that he actually does go up, and he does it secretly. And it's a little weird, like in the English, it's like he says, you go up, I'm not going up to this festival. And then like the next verse is like, but he did though, right? And it sounds like a little like, okay, so is he like lying to them? Like it's in a like original Greek, it doesn't quite come across the same way, but like he's not necessarily ruling out going. He's just saying right now when you're going, and I would normally go with you, and our family would go as a group, it's not my time yet. Doesn't mean it won't be my time right after you leave. Doesn't mean it won't be my time halfway through the festival, right? It just means right now is not the time, right? Jesus is on a different clock than they are. There's this rhythm of 3 times a year we go up to Jerusalem for the feasts, right? This is a big part of their annual calendar. Jesus is basically saying, I'm on a different calendar than you because it's not the time yet. Now, when Jesus says time, the Greek here is this word, and Brad, you know this word. We were just talking about this. I know this is so nerdy, but I had a really hard time writing that without the Greek letters. I'll do it for fun. All right. Oh, now I'm writing another one. So just in case you were curious, it looks something like that. So Jesus uses this word, kairos. Kairos. Now there's a few words for time in the ancient Greek language, and they're used in different ways. You have, for example, chronos, where we get like chronology or words like that. Chronos is more of like a period of time, a length of time. Kairos is this interesting word because it's like, this is the word you use. It's talking about like a special time, like there's a meaning to the time, right? So it's like, it's an opportune time, it's a timely moment. Or it's like a special, like God ordained, like God planned this kind of moment, right? It's frequently used that way. When Jesus says, my kairos has not come yet, he says, for you, your kairos is always ready. Why? Because like you don't care about God's appointed time for anything. You just do whatever you want. So for you, any time is good enough. But for me, I want to do things on God's clock. God has an appointed time. Like the time for me to go to this festival, there will be a time. The things that are coming up, there will be a time. Realize when Jesus goes up to the festival, right at the end of what we were reading this morning, when Jesus goes to the festival, he will not return to Galilee again until after he's risen from the dead. He is going down south to Judea for the last time, the way John tells it. So when he says his time has not yet come, he really means it. Like this is coming up. He doesn't have long. We're talking, if this is the Festival of Tabernacles, we're talking about 6 months before the Passover. And Jesus gets crucified during Passover week. Right? So he means it. So what he tells them is, my time has not yet come. What Jesus understands is that timing is everything. Timing is everything. There's this cool passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. You've probably heard it somewhere before. In Ecclesiastes chapter 3, this is King Solomon, 1,000 years, give or take, before Jesus, saying, there's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. The point he's saying I think something that we all realize as we go through life, or hopefully you figured this out if you haven't already, there's a time and a place, isn't there? Right? Generally speaking, you don't tell jokes at a funeral. Generally speaking, you don't talk about death at a wedding. Right? Generally speaking, you don't talk about bombs in the airport. Right? Unless you like, cavity searches. Then say whatever you want in an airport. I'm sorry. Right? There's a time and a place for where something is completely appropriate, and there's a time and place where something is completely not appropriate, such as saying cavity searches in a sermon is probably not the time or place. Anyway, great example. You're welcome. That was just for you, so illustrating it for you. There's a time and a place for things. And sometimes we have the wisdom to figure that out. Sometimes you have the ability, you're about to say something and you're able to read the room and go, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't say what I'm thinking right now, right? I shouldn't do the thing I was about to do. Sometimes we can catch ourselves. I'm sure we all have had times where we did not catch ourselves in time, and it was only like looking back, it's like, oh yeah, that was a stupid thing to say. That was a stupid thing to do, right? We've all been there. But there's more to this. There's also a time and a place for things because there are circumstances that are going to come into place at just the right time. God is doing something. God is working behind the scenes. He's preparing for something, and he's putting all the chess pieces in just the right places, and all of a sudden the plan all comes together, and you get to see, oh, this is a kairos moment. This is a moment where God is going to do something different. This is where God is going to do something new and important. This is a meaningful moment right here. We don't always realize when those moments are going to come. He often does not tell us in advance. We may not always realize the significance while it's happening. But I'll tell you, every few years, I think back on something, and I realize, like, oh, there are a bunch of things that happened in the past couple of years that I hated, that did not go the way I wanted, that were extremely disappointing to me, and I see that God was actually at work in all of that. Let me give you an example. I'm a freshman in college. I go to the dining hall for lunch and find a couple of my friends, and I sit there, and there's this guy I've never met, Ryan, sitting there, and I meet Ryan, and he's a fun guy. He's a quirky guy. We actually later on became really good friends, and I miss him a lot. But so I meet this guy Ryan, like, okay, cool, and then the next day I think it was, I'm walking from my dorm to the dining hall again for dinner, and as I'm walking through the parking lot, this car pulls up next to me. And the window rolls down, and it's this guy, Ryan, that I just met yesterday. And he's like, hey, it's my birthday. Want to come to my birthday party? I'm like, sure. Because, I was 18 and I was in college. And just so you know, if you don't go to Bible college, maybe don't say yes to all those offers, right? In the rest of the real world, that's not always, right? If a car pulls up and they offer you candy, say no, right? Okay, but I end up, so basically I find myself, I'm sitting there at Outback Steakhouse, sitting next to this guy, Ryan, that I just met yesterday, and at the table are like 5 or 6 girls that he just met that day, right? So nobody here actually knows this guy, and if you knew Ryan, he's great. He's a lovable guy. He's not at all creepy or anything, but it was just oh, so all of us just met today? Okay, cool. The girls all knew each other. They were in the same dorm for the most part, but it was great, okay. And I'm sitting across from this cute little blonde girl, and her roommate's sitting next to her, and her roommate's telling me, oh yeah, I came here, going to college in Southwest Missouri. She's like, yeah, I came here all the way from Ohio. It's like, oh wow, that's a long way. She's like, yeah, but Kendra here came, she came all the way from Michigan. She came a really long way. It's like, oh wow, that's crazy, and we get to talking, and actually everybody at that table, those are some of our best friends we've ever had in the world. Some of those people sitting at that table, as we look back on that now, and it's like, oh yeah, that's how we met, isn't it? And so that cute little blonde girl sitting across the table from me, about a year later, I ask her out. She goes on a date with me, and then she says she doesn't want to go on any more dates with me. She didn't say it like that. It was a lot nicer. And I was coming on a little bit strong, just a little bit really, really strong. Anyway, and but she was not up for a relationship at that given time. It was not the right time. A few months later, I tried again, and it was the right time. And here we are. And now we got 2 kids and 1 on the way, so now she's stuck with me. But there's a time and a place, right? A couple years later, I'm in my last year in college, And I went to school to be a pastor, and I'm like, okay, I'm graduating college. I need to find a full-time job. So it's like October, November, something like that. And I'm looking at different like job boards online, looking for it at church jobs, and sending out my resume to different places. And I find this church in Indiana, and they're looking for a youth pastor. And so I applied for the job, and I got like a Skype interview, which I felt like it went really well. And it was really cool because one of the things that the pastor was telling me in the interview, he's like, yeah, so I've been through this before. I've done like the whole application process with the church. It's just weird. Like applying for a job is kind of a weird thing anyway, but applying for a job at a church is just like, you just never know what you're going to get. Like everything's a surprise, You just never know. Every church is different, and but and so like the interview, I felt like it was going pretty well. But he was like, yeah, I know how it goes. Like you come in, and it's like it feels like they bring in all the cattle, and they decide which one they like the best, And then he's like, we don't want to do it that way. What we're going to do is we're going to keep talking with you. We're going to keep communicating, and if we like you, we're going to hire you. If we decide not to hire you, we're going to let you know, and then we're going to pick another candidate to start the conversation with, And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I like that, I really respect that. And so, a few weeks go by, and there's not a lot of communication. I don't really think anything of it because it's like we have till May before I graduate anyway, so it's not like, it's not. I don't expect this to happen overnight or anything. But anyway, so Kendra and I are planning on, we're married by that point. That was Kendra in the story before, in case that wasn't clear. I'm not talking about some secret other family I have, right? We're, again, things to not say in church, but anyway. So we're married by that point. We're headed up, Christmas break's coming up. We're going to be coming up to Michigan and visiting Kendra's family. And so, it's like, that church in Indiana, like it's just right on the way. Like it's, right off I-69. Like we could stop by. Like what if we, so we were going to be driving up on a Saturday. It's like, how about we like stop, we'll have some time to kill, and then, we'll get a hotel for the night. And then Sunday morning we'll go to this church, and then, in the afternoon we'll go back up, a couple hours to Michigan. And so we thought, well, that's cool. So, but I thought I should let them know I'm coming, and like, I don't know, on the off chance they think it'd be weird or inappropriate for some reason to have candidates coming in, I don't know. Like I thought I'd let them know, and so I send the pastor an email, and he doesn't really get back to me, but I didn't think too much of it. I just thought, well, he's a busy pastor, he's probably not answering. And a couple weeks later, I think I sent another email, and anyway, so we drive up and we stop for lunch. We're at Applebee's, and I figure, I'm just gonna text him real quick because I haven't really gotten an email back. Like I'm just gonna text to make sure he saw my emails, but it's not a big deal. We're just gonna show up, at church, nothing crazy. So I shoot him a text message, and I'm like, hey, really excited to see you guys tomorrow. And he replies to my text. He's like, who is this? And I'm like, oh, he probably didn't save my number in his phone. I'm like, oh, sorry, this is Scott Reed. I applied for the youth pastor job, and did you get my emails? We were planning on coming to visit because we're in the area. And he's like, oh, we already hired somebody. I'm like, oh, that would have been good to know. Like all that talk, of like, don't worry, we're gonna talk to you before we even talk to anybody else. We're gonna make up our mind about you. And clearly they made up their mind about me. They just didn't tell me that they were ready to move on. I don't know what happened, but he's like, oh yeah, sorry, my email's been acting up. It's pretty annoying actually. I'm like, yeah, I think it's annoying too. That would have been good to know too. But anyway, all the things not being communicated here, and so I knew I might not get the job. It's not like it was guaranteed or anything. I had one interview, and I thought it went well, but I've had a lot of interviews that I thought went well that did not go well, right? And so I'm just really, I'm ticked off. I'm disappointed. I'm devastated by this. So we cancel the hotel reservation. We get back on the road. We just drive to Kendra's parents' house, and I remember sitting on the couch in my in-laws' living room, and just like, I'm like, well, I guess it's back to the drawing board. And I get out my laptop, and I start looking at some job listings, and I see this new one that must have just popped up in the last few days, for this church in Monroe, Michigan, called Monroe Christian Church. And I'm like, hey, Kendra, is Monroe anywhere close by here? Because we were kind of aiming for something close to where her parents lived in Britain, Michigan. And I'm like, is Monroe close by here? And Kendra's like, oh yeah, actually it's really close. Why? It's like, oh, well, there's this church job there. She's like, oh, well, that'd be really cool. Like, this is exciting. We haven't found anything this close yet. That one in Indiana was like one of the closest ones we had found, and that's a couple hours out. And anyway, so right then and there, like I print out my resume and my cover letter. I go around the corner to the post office, because in Britain, Michigan, there's like a gas station and a post office, and now there's a Dollar General, and that's it. That's the whole town. So but I go around the corner and I go to the post office. I send out my resume right then and there. And little did I know, Monroe Christian Church, on their end, they had put an ad up, and they got some applicants, and they did some interviews and stuff, and they had a guy that they offered the job to that they were really excited about. Actually, it turned out he was one of my classmates in college, but he ended up he was going to take the job, but he ended up actually turning them down, actually backing out of it, because he really felt God was leading him to this other church in Kansas that had also made an offer. And so he ended up going there, and they were just so, felt the same way I did. Just frustrated and devastated, and man, we have to start this all over again. We thought, because it had been a hard process to find anybody. They had been through a lot. It was a struggle. And, now they finally had somebody they were excited about, and then it didn't pan out. And so then they're like, well, back to the drawing board. They put the listing back on the website, and 2 days later, they get my resume in the mail. It's like, I don't know if it was 2 days later, but some short amount of time later, they get my resume in the mail. And one thing led to another. We got to talking, and by the time I graduated, we loaded up a U-Haul. We moved up to Monroe, Michigan, moved into an apartment, the River Raisin Apartments up here, and we started serving at Monroe Christian Church. And it was so funny, because I think about that time, and it's like, there were so many different pieces that didn't, if one little thing had not fallen into place exactly the way it did, this wouldn't have happened, right? I happened to, this other church stringing me along just happened to bring me to a point where the timing was perfect. That was the best possible time for me to send me their resume, was when they were absolutely hopeless and depressed, so that I would come across like a hero. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that they would be there could not have been a better time for me to send my resume. And that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this other church that I really got my hopes up for, and didn't work out at all. Right? And then for Monroe Christian Church, it wouldn't have been me if it wasn't for this other church. There's so many things that wouldn't have worked out. The timing would not have worked out the same way. And I don't know why, but I think God brought me to Monroe Christian Church. And actually, every few years, I think I find another reason why. Right? So I graduate from Bible college. We come to Monroe Christian Church, and it's which, by the way, I think you guys all know, that's what this building was built by Monroe Christian Church back in the day, right? That was the old church that was here. We were there about 3 years. And I really struggled a lot of that time with I feel like God brought me here, but I do not know why. See, the pastor who was there before me, his name was Marvin Flowers, and I never met the guy, but I've heard so many awesome stories about Marvin. He was just awesome. He was like a whirlwind of energy and activity. He was this guy who grew up on a farm, and he just wore overalls all the time. He just wore denim bib overalls. That's all he ever wore. He would wear khakis for church, and then after church he would go in his office and change into the overalls, right after the sermon, so that he could be back in his overalls. He was just a ball of energy. He was like a whirlwind, and everybody would just get sucked into his orbit. It was just he was such a great guy, and everybody loved him so much. And then 3 or 4 weeks before Christmas, he gets diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And by the end of the year, he's gone. And it all happened so fast. It all happened so fast, so unexpected. And everybody loved this guy so much. And those are the shoes that I came in to try to fill. Not like anybody really expected me to be Marvin or anything like that. But it was it sounded like, from everything people told me about him, he was exactly, if you were asking me, he was exactly what Monroe Christian Church needed. And I was exactly not. I was a smug little, wet behind the ears, fresh out of college, think I know everything kid. And I was frustrated with the people in the church because I felt like they just didn't get it. I didn't really take the time to listen to them, to really get to know them in a lot of cases on a deeper level. It was really on me, and I continuously wondered, why would God have brought me here? You could have kept Marvin, couldn't you? So we got, as a church, we got to this point, it was just this really, really low point. just like I was so depressed. I had so much anxiety. A lot of the whole time I was there, I had so much anxiety that I did not realize it all was anxiety. Wasn't really aware of what was going on inside me. But like, I hit this deep, deep depression, especially like the summer of 2017. I was just worthless. I was just so depressed. And we were at this point as a church where it just felt like everything was just falling apart. Like the church had been on the decline, and me being there did not change it being on the decline. And we had, right at the end of 2016, we had a couple families leave the church, and I didn't even know why. They didn't even tell me. I didn't realize they were leaving, and which you guys know. Some of you in this room, I know you know what that feels like, and so it was just a hard time. And we were at a point, the leadership team and I, in 2017, we were looking at the numbers and like, well, we're actually on a trajectory right now where we're not breaking even. Our expenses are pretty low, couldn't be much lower. I didn't appreciate at the time how little they were paying me. They were doing the best they could, and to me, it felt like a lot of money because it was my first full-time job. It was more money than I ever made, but it was not a lot. And we were on a shoestring budget anyway. I mean, like we weren't spending a lot of money, but we weren't breaking even. We were eating through our savings, and if something didn't change, at some point we would have to decide which bill not to pay, or whether to pay my paycheck. Like we were going to have to make a hard decision about that. And we had a couple meetings as a congregation, that didn't feel like we really accomplished anything. It was just a whole bunch of sitting around feeling sorry for ourselves and not really, it's everyone else's fault, but not my fault, or it's your fault. No, it's not my fault. It's their fault. It's the world's fault. It's our culture's fault. It's young people today's fault. It's whatever. And it was just a depressing time. And it was all like, God, why did you could have kept Marvin around. You could have, like, any number of things that God could have done differently. That circumstances could have been different. And it was just a very depressing time. And I came to a point towards the end of the summer in 2017, I remember coming to a point where I just realized I have been sitting around feeling sorry for myself this whole time. God brought me here to be a pastor to people. There were actually a couple of new families that had started coming to the church that summer, and it was really clear to me that this was an opportunity. These were people that really, they needed a church family. These were people that didn't really know Jesus all that well, and this was an opportunity to really do what I came here to do. And I was neglecting that because I was spending all my time worrying about the future. And so eventually I reached a point where I just I was at peace with it. And I was like, you know what? Like, I need to take my focus off of myself. I need to quit feeling sorry for myself. God brought me here to be a pastor to people. I'm going to be a pastor to the people who are here. And if somebody doesn't like me, they don't want me to be their pastor, like, okay, I'm not going to like force it, but there are some people who are interested in knowing Jesus better, and I could be there to help them know Jesus better. And I'm going to focus on that instead of focusing on me. And it was a big turning point for me. And then about a month later, I get this Facebook message from a guy named Grant, who's a pastor at a church up in Taylor. And he wants to know if I want to meet for lunch. And we do, and it turns out we went to the same college at different times. Like, we went to the same college. We knew a lot of people in common, and he was telling me about, they started that church just a few years ago. The church was called Life Bridge Church. And he was telling me how it just been like this whirlwind of activity over the past few years since they started the church. God was just doing crazy things there. They had, that year alone in 2017, they had 120 baptisms. 120 people put their faith in Jesus for the first time at Life Bridge Church. And they were just kind of like overwhelmed with it all. Like, they didn't expect any of this. God was just doing all these crazy cool things. And he starts telling me that they feel God's leading them to start a Monroe campus of Life Bridge Church. And none of them have any experience with it. They have no idea how to do it. They don't have the money for it. They don't have the people even for the church they already have. Certainly not enough to start a whole new campus. They have no idea how this is going to work, but they figure in a year or two, God's going to, they'll be able to get this started. Right now, it's just kind of a thing they're starting to think about. Well, one thing leads to another, and by Easter, Life Bridge Church Monroe campus launches in this room right here, in this building right here. And it was funny because, like, he just wanted to, like, get, he was they were looking to start a new church around here. He just wanted to make connections with some other pastors in the area and stuff. And like, I wasn't the only pastor he was getting together with. And nobody expected that conversation to go where it did. But one thing leads to another. And the whole way through, it was like God had orchestrated this. Like nobody involved knew where this was going, but it was like everything was just right. Everything fell into just the right place. It was uncanny. Like the number of coincidences, there were so many people that just came out of the woodwork to be involved with this church. It was like, who are you? Like they just heard about this somehow. And they're like, yeah, actually I've been praying for exactly this kind of church to come to town. I've been praying for exactly this kind of thing to happen. It's like, really? Like, wow, that's kind of a coincidence, And like there were people at LifeBridge, like they didn't expect things to happen that quickly, but the having the facilities here made it possible to suddenly to start the project a lot sooner. And things really took off. Things were going well, and then a lot of you guys know LifeBridge Church joined up with 242 Community Church, and you guys know where it goes from there. All these steps along the way, if one thing had been a little bit different, if this hadn't happened, it wouldn't have turned out that way. And there are people today who know Jesus because of LifeBridge Church or 242 Community Church or CrossWalk Church, like all of these different pieces that fell into place at just the right moments. Nothing since I moved to Monroe, it's been like 6.5 years ago now since I moved to Monroe, not one thing in my life has gone the way I expected it to. And yet I've seen God work in ways that I was not planning. It wasn't my idea. I wouldn't have done it that way. But now in retrospect, I see why he did it his way and not mine. Why God wasn't sitting around waiting to see what I think. Like, thank him and praise him that he wasn't, right? God was putting things in place at just the right time so that he could come in and do something that was years in the making that nobody could have predicted. And there are people that know Jesus because of that. And this is just the beginning. I mean, there's so much future ahead for Monroe and for the churches serving this community right now. And COVID happened and everything else that's happened and everything that CrossWalk has been through, there's been a lot of change. There's been a lot going on. There's been a lot of crisis. I share these stories, and to be honest with you, I have like 50 other stories I wanted to tell this morning of ways of God just totally defying my expectations, of me being totally disillusioned and disappointed that things weren't working the way they should, and then God just bringing it all together at the end, and you realize God was doing something. God was working behind the scenes. Even the things that I thought, this is not working because of me, God was working on something else the whole time. Things that only God could have predicted. Now, it's funny. I was talking to Brad this week, and Brad, I listened to your message I don't know if you know, it was a year ago tomorrow, like exactly a year ago. Brad preached essentially the same core message about this word, like talking about this word kairos, and I recommend you look it up. It was a really good message. But like, Brad talked last year about how there are these times, there are these appointed times where God is doing something, and you shared about, you believe God was like going to do something in this church in the coming year and in the years to come. And I believe that is true. And I believe we're starting to see that. This church has been through so much already. And God has so much more in store. If I've learned anything in the past few years, and I don't know if I can really say I've learned it, I'm still trying to learn it. It is that when you think you are at your lowest and things could not get worse, get ready because God is doing something that you don't see. If you're disappointed with the way things are going, it's probably, for one thing, it's probably because what you're going through is genuinely hard. And I'm not trying to minimize that or diminish that at all. But when you are at your lowest point, it's possible that God is actually doing something through that because he has something in store and he's getting you ready for it in ways that you will not realize until after it's happened. CrossWalk is in the middle of something, and I don't know what it is. I have no idea. I'm not saying this because God has given me special insight of like, this is what's in the future. I'm saying this because this happens every time. Every time. God is doing something among us right now. And I don't know what 2023 is going to bring about, or 2022, or whatever year it is. I don't even know anymore. Right? If the past couple of years have taught us anything, it should be don't ever have expectations for the future, because it's not going to be what you think, right? Things can come out of left field that you did not see coming, right? And there's going to be things like that. This year, there are going to be things that nobody knows are coming. That's how every year is. It's been an especially crazy couple of years, but this year, there will be things that we do not see coming. There will be life-changing moments. We will lose people this year. We will gain people this year. We will win and we will lose. We will suffer and we will have joy. Whatever happens this year, though, us in this room, anybody watching or listening online right now, we are doing this. We have the privilege to do this as a family, to do this together. God is on the move in our midst. God is working among us right now. And we don't know where he's going with this. Kind of like when I tell a story, right? And it just kind of rambles on. And you're like, is this going somewhere? Is there a point to this? Is he going to say cavity search again? Right? Except in a much cooler way. God is working something, and we don't know where it's going yet. We can't see it yet. But God is doing something among us, and we get to be a part of it. We get to be a part of what God is doing. And we get to share that together. We will have hard times and we will have good times this year, and we will have those times together. We will do our best to honor God, and sometimes we will fail. When we fail, we will fail together, and we will pick each other up, and we will keep moving. And when things are going well, instead of sitting around feeling good about ourselves, we'll press on. We'll keep doing the good work, and we'll do that work together. I don't know why, but God has brought all of us here for a reason. I don't know if every little thing that happens in our lives was like pre-planned, that God said, God ordained this particular thing will happen, and that you're going to wear this shirt on this day. Like, I don't know if it's that granular. I don't know if God does that. I don't know if God cares on that level. But I should be able to say, after everything that I've seen in this building, all the changes that I've seen standing here in this building, if that's what God did before, I can't wait to see what he's going to do next. There's just too many coincidences, too many things at play. There's somebody behind all of this, and I don't know where he's taking it, but we get to go there together. So this year, let's do that. Let's lean into that. Let's lean into God. Let's spend time in prayer. Let's be open and ready to hear. We might have our own ideas of what God's going to do when he's going to do it. We might be like Jesus' brothers, like, hey, God, why don't you do like this? Isn't this the right time? Isn't this the best possible opportunity to do this? And God's like, no, I'm kind of on a different schedule than you. Let's, like Jesus, let's listen. Let's be open. Let's be ready so that when God says, hey, it's time, we know what to do and we're ready to go. We can't plan everything. Our plans won't always work out, but we can prepare. We can prepare by leaning into our relationship with God, by leaning into our community together and our relationships with one another. We can prepare for whatever God has in store by just being faithful in the little things, by being faithful with what he's already given us. Let's do that. And I say that not because you guys don't, but because you guys do. I've been impressed from day one being at this church. Every person in this building right now, the level of commitment, the level of devotion that you guys have to one another, to this church, to doing whatever you can to serve God and to serve the people around you. The amount of selflessness in this room right here, in this building right here, is astounding. And I will tell you, I've had the privilege to serve and to be a part of multiple churches over my lifetime. I don't know how many churches I've been at where there was just this deep, like, you guys really care about each other here. I really get that feeling. And it's attractive, for lack of a better word. Like, it's exciting. My family and I, from day one of meeting you guys, was like, we want to be a part of this. These are people that have a good time together, that make good food, by the way, so that was a selling point. But like, these are people that have a good time together. These are people that genuinely care about each other. Wouldn't it be cool to be a part of that? Wouldn't it be so great for our kids to get to be a part of a church family like this? And we're so thrilled and we're so thankful to be here. I don't know what this year has in store, but God's doing something here. And we may not see all of it on our timeline in the time that we expect, but there is a time coming. There are these special kairos moments that are going to happen this year. Let's be ready for those. Let's look forward to those. And let's prepare right now by coming together, by praying, by serving, and by trusting that God knows what he's doing in all of it.